The Hidden History of the Human Race, Part 10. You're listening to Brothers of the Serpent podcast.
And welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, angels and demons, monsters and serpents, to Brothers of the Serpent podcast, coming to you not live from the 10 by 10 by 10 tangent cube of science, nestled amongst the dusty bones of an ancient seabed high atop the Edwards Plateau. And it is, I feel like it's unseasonably cool here. It's like been in the low 80s, like cloudy.
Yeah, it's been nice.
Yeah.
It's been nice. But last week it was pretty freaking hot.
Yeah, it got pretty hot last week. So yeah, like what did we just hear at the beginning there?
Oh, I didn't put that in there.
They're not going to go in there? Okay.
Oh, I guess I can put them in there.
Yeah, I thought they were going in there.
Oh.
Zero mistakes, folks.
I guess they're in there now. That was Lila May. We brought her in here for Laura to do the intro, and she talked into the mic, so I put them together.
Yeah. Yep. So what do we got agriculturally? What's going on out there? Everything's growing.
Yeah, we got veraison, which is the changing of the color of the grapes.
Yes,
They're turning purple, which means we've got to get our nets buttoned up on the bottom or stapled up so that the birds can't get in and eat everything.
Yeah.
And then we'll probably be doing the last testing and stabilization of the wine before bottling. Hopefully we'll be able to do bottling like early August.
Yeah, because we got to get them out of the barrels because we need those barrels, right?
Yeah, and I'm trying to set it up to where all of the supplies and everything we need get delivered in time for us to do all that bottling right prior to harvest.
Right. Yeah.
So the longer they age in the barrels, the better. So we don't want to take them out like right now, but
yeah.
Still waiting on bottle orders as well.
And labels?
I haven't even turned in the labels yet.
Looked at that, yeah.
Well, I have. I've started the process with Mike from HowTube. He's already got the basic idea. I just have to get him all the text changes, which would be like the tasting notes for the new wine, the varietal and the where they came from and the alcohol content. So I got to get the labs done.
Yeah. Okay.
So yeah, that's what I'm going to focus on this week.
All right.
Actually getting all that stuff done.
All right.
But yeah, everything's beautiful. It's looking good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All the olive trees were killed. I can't remember if we said that or not. The ones we planted out at the other property.
But you said some were coming up from the ground, right?
Yeah. So they're growing back out of the ground as bushes.
Yeah.
And since they're out of sight, hopefully we can just leave them there and see what happens.
Yeah.
I talked to the boss about that, and he agreed that since he doesn't have to look at them, he can probably leave them alone.
It'd be nice. You watch. He's like, next year he'll be pulling them all out and we'll be planting a vineyard in there.
Yeah.
Like, dude, no. We'll have to buy equipment for down there or be moving equipment all the time. 2-hour drive.
Yeah. Yep. Lots of rain too. Getting lots of rain here. So that's good. We haven't had to water the vines too much this year.
Yeah. I did a little bit of watering last week, but on the hillside.
On the hillside.
Yeah, because it drains.
Yeah. Drains out.
And you just water the babies a lot. Once they get established, you don't have to water them nearly as much. Their roots are deep.
Yeah.
So.
All right. Well, let's go ahead and do space weather news. From spaceweather.com, solar sector boundary crossings. Earth is about to cross a fold in the heliospheric current sheet, a vast wavy structure in interplanetary space, separating regions of opposite magnetic polarity. The crossing, called a solar sector boundary crossing, is expected on June 30th and could trigger minor geomagnetic activity around Earth's poles. Also, we had a CME yesterday. Space Weather News issued an all-quiet alert, and almost immediately something exploded. During the early hours of June 27th, a magnetic filament snapped near the sun's western limb, hurling part of itself into space. Coronagraphs aboard the Solar and Heliospheric Observatory recorded the resulting coronal mass ejection. This CME is not headed for Earth. The blast site was on the sun's western limb and maybe even a little behind it, putting the cloud well outside the Earth's strike zone. Nevertheless, NOAA analysts are evaluating the possibility of a glancing blow from the CME's flank. If there is an Earth-directed component, it will probably arrive in 3 or 4 days, so stay tuned. And current conditions. What?
We forgot to introduce the watcher.
Oh, yeah.
What are the current conditions?
Current conditions, 306.9 kilometers per second. Density is 5.5 protons per cubic centimeter. Sunspot number is 32. Neutron count is 9.1% above the space age average. And the KP index is quiet, rated as 1 for now and the 24-hour max.
All right.
Yeah. Now we can introduce the watcher.
Yeah, so we actually have the watcher here for the beginning of the show. Things have been a little hectic lately. So, yeah, we're just not used to having him here. And I was like, hey, we're going to introduce you at the beginning. And then, of course, we forgot.
Right.
So what's up, man? How's it going? How you been?
Pretty good. Pretty good. Working a lot. It was 100 in the valley today, by the way. 100 degrees in McAllen. So screw your clouds. I feel like we could make a game for the Snake Force out of just listening to Russ do the intro, figure how far along we are in the podcast. Because it was very strong, this episode. Lots of energy, powerful, you know.
How
like
far
the
along?
faster it is. Yeah, the faster it is and like the more certain you are of each word, like the way further on in the catalog we are.
Oh, okay, I see. In the catalog.
So you take 3 different shows and you play the intros from the 3 shows, and then the person has to pick like which was the earliest one and which was the later one.
Okay, yeah.
You know, put them in order.
Put them in order.
Yeah. Yeah. Sounds like a good game.
And if Kyle does the intro, it's just you're gonna get there, buddy. I know.
Show
I know.
ever.
You're gonna get there.
Well, actually, what happened is I because of this, you know, the episode 201 thing, I got to listen to a bunch of me doing the intro from older shows, and I was thinking, man, I had a lot more energy back then. So I've been trying to get that back. So maybe that's what you're hearing. But I think there was a period there where I was kind of being lazy with it. I'm just like, welcome back, folks. Oh, Brothers of the Certain Podcast, you know, and I heard
just
I heard those older ones, and I was like, wow, that sounds good. I need to do it like that. So
yeah,
that's how I feel about it. So there might be a period in there where it would trick people.
So in summation, my game idea sucked.
What did you say?
So in summation, my game idea sucks and totally wouldn't work. All right.
Yeah.
No.
Still be a good game.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Fair enough. By the way, Verasian sounds like a polite way of asking somebody which like flavor of Asian they are, like a politically correct version.
God. This is why we don't give him a mic, folks.
Normally why he's muted.
You know. Now that I've offended at least part of the audience.
Radio silent.
Well, we're glad to have you, buddy. Thanks for being there, even though you just got off of
stuff in the chat room.
Yeah, even though you just got off of 24.
Yeah.
So
let's see. Bitcoin update. Crypto update here. Bitcoin is $34,758.10, and Ethereum is $2,118.82.
all right,
There you go.
cool. All right,
What you got?
Homo research.
Yeah.
New hominids, folks. This is from Heritage Daily. The Nesher Ramla homotype, a prehistoric human previously unknown to science. Researchers have identified a new type of early human at the Nesher Ramla site, dated to 140,000 to 120,000 years ago. The morphology of the Nesher Ramla humans shares features with both Neanderthals and archaic Homo. At the same time, this type of Homo is very unlike modern humans, displaying a completely different skull structure, no chin, and very large teeth. And yeah, the pieces that they show here on the image is just like the lower jaw and then a piece of the skull cap. And then they sort of have like a graphic kind of showing what they think the rest of the skull would look like. Researchers believe that the Nesharamla Homo type is the source population from which most humans of the Middle Pleistocene developed. They suggest that this group is the so-called missing population that mated with Homo sapiens who arrived in the region around 200,000 years ago. The Nesharamla Homo type was an ancestor of both Neanderthals in Europe and the archaic Homo populations of Asia. The discovery enables us to make a new sense of previously found human fossils, add another piece to the puzzle of human evolution, and understand the migrations of humans in the Old World. Even though they lived so long ago in the late Middle Pleistocene, which is 474,000 to 130,000 years ago, the Nesharamla people can tell us a fascinating tale, revealing a great deal about their descendants' evolution and way of life. So yeah, when I'm reading this story, thinking about it, reading it with these eyes, basically, and seeing the uncertainty of the date there, 474,000 to 130,000, and they say in the headline they date it to 140 to 120,000 years.
Right. But the Middle Pleistocene is a lot longer than that. Is what those numbers are showing you, I think.
Oh, okay, yeah, that's right.
Yeah. So they're putting it at late Middle Pleistocene.
Okay, yeah, you're right.
But that doesn't mean. But I still think you're right. But yeah, keep going because that's interesting. But like you have to, I would wonder what makes them put it at the late Middle Pleistocene, because again, like we were reading last week, when they try to use animal fossils to date the layers,
they're all the same.
They're all stable throughout the Middle Pleistocene and late Pleistocene.
I've been thinking about that too. So, yeah, all right.
So it's probably dating by morphology, which is exactly what we're going through in the book right now. That's good.
Well, and this is weird too, because they're saying this is the source population from which most humans of the Middle Pleistocene developed. So anyway.
Okay, so
they are trying to say that this is a direct ancestor.
Yeah.
Right? Whereas there's a lot of these other ones that they used to think were ancestors that they're now saying, well, they're like
brother or sister species. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so the important human fossil was found by Dr. Zaidner of the Hebrew University during salvage excavations at the Nesher-Ramla prehistoric site near the city of Ramla. Digging down about 8 meters, the excavators found large quantities of animal bones, including horses, fallow deer, and aurochs, as well as stone tools and human bones. Dr. Yossi Zaidner said this is an extraordinary discovery. We had never imagined that alongside Homo sapiens, archaic Homo roamed the area so late in human history. The archaeological finds associated with human fossils show that Nesher-Ramla Homo possessed advanced stone tool production technologies and most likely interacted with the local Homo sapiens.
Okay.
So they're surprised that it was so late.
Yeah. Okay.
So I don't know. The discovery of the Nesher-Ramla Homo type challenges the prevailing hypothesis that the Neanderthals originated in Europe. Before these new findings, says Dr. Hershkovitz, most researchers believe the Neanderthals to be a European story, in which small groups of Neanderthals were forced to migrate southwards to escape spreading glaciers, with some arriving in the land of Israel about 70,000 years ago. The Nesher-Ramla fossils make us question this theory, suggesting that the ancestors of European Neanderthals lived in the Levant as early as 400,000 years ago, repeatedly migrating westward to Europe and eastward to Asia. In fact, our findings imply that the famous Neanderthals of Western Europe are only the remnants of a much larger population that lived here in the Levant and not the other way around. Despite the absence of DNA in these fossils, the findings from Nesher Ramla offer a solution to a great mystery in the evolution of Homo. How did genes of Homo sapiens penetrate the Neanderthal population that presumably lived in Europe long before the arrival of Homo sapiens? Geneticists who studied the DNA of European Neanderthals have previously suggested the existence of a Neanderthal-like population, which they call the missing population or the X population, that had mated with Homo sapiens more than 200,000 years ago. In the anthropological paper now published in Science, the researchers suggest that the Nesher Ramla homotype might represent this population, heretofore missing from the record of human fossils. Moreover, the researchers propose that the humans from the Nesher Ramla are not the only ones of their kind discovered in the region, and that some human fossils found previously in Israel, which have baffled anthropologists for years, like the fossils from Tabun Cave 160,000 years ago, Zutiye Cave 250,000 years ago, and Kesem Cave 400,000 years ago, belong to the same new human group now called the Nesher Ramla homotype. People think in paradigms, says Dr. Rachel Serig. That's why efforts have been made to ascribe these fossils to known human groups like Homo sapiens, Homo erectus, Homo heidelbergensis, or Neanderthals. But now we say, no, this is a group in itself with distinct features and characteristics. At a later stage, small groups of the Nesher Ramla homotype migrated to Europe, where they evolved into the classic Neanderthals that we are familiar with, and also to Asia, where they became archaic populations with Neanderthal-like features. As a crossroads between Africa, Europe, and Asia, the land of Israel served as a melting pot where different human populations mixed with one another to later spread throughout the Old World. The discovery from the Nesher Ramla site writes a new and fascinating chapter in the story of humankind. Professor Gerard Weber, an associate from Vienna University, argues that the story of Neanderthal evolution will be told differently after this discovery. Europe was not the exclusive refugium of Neanderthals from where they occasionally diffused into West Asia. We think that there was much more lateral exchange in Eurasia, and that the Levant is geographically a crucial starting point, or at least the bridgehead for this process. So, and that is strangely enough, both of these showed up in my news feed this week.
This was from Heritage Daily?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I'll often, like, in my news feed, I'll see, a story headline or whatever, and then I click on it, and then I read the story, and then I go and search that story separately.
Yeah.
And read a bunch of different articles, and usually try to find the one that I like.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, I just wanted to give the.
I'd never, and I actually, I think I found this one, and I subscribed to their RSS because I didn't have this site, Heritage Daily, but yeah, they have some good stories. All right, and this one is from Science News. This is the Dragon Man skull that was also discovered this week.
Yeah. And also in 1930.
In 1933, this week. This is it. A fossil skull nicknamed Dragon Man has surfaced in China under mysterious circumstances with big news for Neanderthals, which they spell with a T instead of the TH.
Yep, Neanderthal. Yep.
Dragon Man belonged to a previously unrecognized Stone Age species that replaces Neanderthals as the closest known relatives of people today, researchers say. A nearly complete male skull represents a species dubbed Homo longi. The scientists described the skull, which dates to at least 146,000 years ago, and analyzed its position in Homo evolution in 3 papers published June 25th in the Innovation. So these are both the same dates, too.
Yeah, that's weird.
This skull is 140,000 years old, and the one I was just from
140,
Ramla,
120.
140 to 120. So I don't know. This is just weird. Quang Ji, a paleontologist, also at Hebei, GEO, receives the skull in 2018 from a farmer who said the fossil had been dug up by a co-worker of his grandfather's in 1933. During bridge construction over a river in Harbin, China, the worker allegedly scooped the skull out of the river sediment. Whether or not that story is true, this fossil could help answer questions about a poorly understood period of human evolution. So that's the big question here. How did they date this one, right?
Yeah.
All they had was a skull and a story. I think they talk about the dating methods here, maybe. The Harbin cranium presents a combination of features setting it apart from other Homo species. The name H. longi derives from a Chinese term for the province where it was found, which translates as Dragon River. That term inspired the nickname Dragon Man. As in Homo sapiens, the Harbin skull held a large brain situated atop a relatively short face and small cheekbones. But traits such as a long, low brain case, thick brow ridges, large molars, and almost square eye sockets recall several extinct Homo populations or species, including Neanderthals and Homo heidelbergensis. Those species date to a key period of Homo evolution called the Middle Pleistocene, which ran from about 789,000 to 130,000 years ago.
Yep.
So this is a different set of dates for the Middle Pleistocene. Measures of
so they must have been given us the middle Pleistocene, the late Middle Pleistocene. I'm serious. I've come across it to like middle, late Pleistocene. You're like, all right, dude, maybe you ought to subdivide these a little bit more.
Yeah. Measures of the decay of radioactive uranium in the Harbin skull provide its minimum age estimate of 146,000 years. So there you go. There's the dating. Chemical analysis of the fossil and sediment still attached to it indicate an origin in the Harbin area, even if the researchers cannot confirm the farmer's story to Xi. The researchers estimate Dragon Man's evolutionary status using statistical comparisons to other Middle Pleistocene Homo fossils from Africa, Asia, and Europe. These comparisons indicate that H. longi shared a common ancestor with Homo sapiens around 949,000 years ago.
Dude looks pretty ripped in that picture.
Yeah, he is, yeah. While the common ancestor of Neanderthals and Homo sapiens dated to just over 1 million years ago. If so, then Homo longi had a slightly closer evolutionary relationship to Homo sapiens than Neanderthals did. So Neanderthals obviously are getting the boot here, folks. On both of these stories.
Yeah.
Nee's team concludes that H. longi was a contemporary of evolving Asian lines of H. sapiens, Neanderthals, and Denisovans, a population known mainly from ancient DNA. The Harbin skull most closely resembles several other Middle Pleistocene Homo fossils from Chinese sites, the researchers say. Some of those fossils are now regarded as Denisovans. Attempts will be made to extract DNA from and identify the protein structure of the Harbin skull for a comparison to Denisovans. So that'll be interesting to see. Analysis of the geographic distribution of various skeletal traits in Middle Pleistocene Homo fossils indicate that relatively small groups from various species and populations traveled within Africa, Asia, and Europe, sometimes interbreeding. Nee's team suspects that groups based in southern areas where they could survive during periods of extreme cold ventured farther when temperatures warmed. Treks were made back and forth across continents, most often from Africa to Asia, the investigators say. Some groups died out along the way, while others eventually passed on genes and skeletal traits over great distances, they suspect. That scenario seems likely, especially given the surprising mix of features on the Harbin skull, says paleoanthropologist Katarina Harvati of some university and place in Germany. And she did not participate in the new studies, by the way.
Of course, yeah.
But she thinks it's a solid theory. Homo groups frequently traversed what's now northern China as temperatures warmed and rainy periods fluctuated after around 300,000 years ago, says paleoanthropologist Sheila Athreya of Texas A&M University in College Station, who also was not involved in the new studies. But she argues that the Harbin skull looks much like several other Middle Pleistocene Homo fossils from northern China and should not be classified as a new species. Ancient Homo groups on the move evolved unique features during periods of isolation and shared features during periods of contact and mating, she proposes. Intermittent connections across vast areas created closely related populations that inherited varying sets of traits. So she's talking about just genetic, genes, differences in
right. People look different. Yeah.
Yeah. What are we trying to say? Recessive genes and dominant genes, whatever, all that kind of stuff. The Harbin skull and newly described Israeli fossils, classified only as Nesher-Ramla Homo, display anatomical variations on a Middle Pleistocene Homo theme, Athrea says. So that's the end of the story, but she's like, these are not new types, basically. Yeah. This is just like differences in appearance based on regional,
and travel and
So I don't know. I've got 3 other stories that maybe we'll do a Patreon segment about it all, but I just was looking up new hominid species, and there's a lot of stories in the past 10 years of all these new finds, and they're all kind of saying the same stuff. They give you this sort of, they're theorized stories of how they're all traveling and what they're all doing based on this like little fragment of skull.
Yeah. Yeah.
Or in this case, like in the case of the Chinese
Dragon
Man, it's just like straight out of this book, right?
Yeah. Yep.
Farmer's grandpa's best friend's son, whatever.
Pulls it out of that old
dug
creek
it out
bed
of that
over
creek bed, yeah. Where and then I don't know.
We done had it hanging on the wall for nigh on 40 years.
Yeah. So it would be worth it really to just dig up all these papers, the actual papers, and look at like, okay, how did they date the skull? And I don't know. It's a mess.
Yeah, but it is interesting that these are popping up right when we're getting to the end of this book.
I know. These 2 stories pop up in the same week, right at the last, the very last part of this book, where they're talking about, the modern accepted finds.
Yeah, that's right. What time we got?
They're building on. Anyway, they're still building on freaking Java Man.
Yeah.
We're 27
we got
minutes.
some time for a couple of emails, maybe. All right. Going back to the email archives here, still trying to catch up. Let's see. This is called Tiny Elephants from Roxy. Hey, bros. I listen every day and made it to the 90s before I went back and started over to make sure that I grok all that talk.
Grok.
I just got my t-shirt in the mail. Thanks. I love it. Episode 59. Kyle muses that the elephants might be tiny because of Russ's idea about the magnets, and perhaps that's true. I just wonder if another point of Russ's might not be applicable. You said we have all these wild dog varieties because of the rich, which made me think if I was a longhead stuck on this godforsaken planet, I would want a tiny pet elephant. If the longheads can create people pills, why not pet elephants? Then I kind of wanted to cry a little because I will never have a tiny pet elephant. Keep on rocking in the electric universe. You're a snake sister Rena, the mail lady. Thank you. Maybe you could have a tiny pet elephant.
Yeah, apparently all it requires is some theory of mind combined with magnets.
That's right. Yeah. Seems simple enough.
Legit. There's got to be spinning mercury in there somewhere.
Probably right. All right. Let's see. This is This is from Eric. It's called Nephilim and the Tower of Babel.
Ooh.
Hail, Snake Bros and Snake Force and the Watcher. I have recently read an interesting theory on the Tower of Babel and was hoping to get your thoughts on it, even though it's currently not in the realm of your most recent discussions on the podcast. I think you would agree with me that the biggest question surrounding the tower, why does God scramble the language of humans during the construction of the tower? Was it because we weren't meant to construct something to reach the heavens, or perhaps there is another reason for the scrambling of languages? L.A. Marzulli wrote a trilogy of books titled On the Trail of the Nephilim. At the end of the first book, he lays out a theory of his that I find really interesting. To put his theory into context, L.A. believes the Nephilim are the fallen angels of the Bible. Upon falling to earth, they decided to corrupt God's creation of man, either by A, breeding with the women, or B, messing with human genetics. This, of course, creates the Nephilim, the longheads, and who knows what other hybrids. These hybrids then create a type of network across the planet. The pyramids and other numerous ancient sites across the earth are part of this network. Although he doesn't believe the pyramids are a power plant, but rather possibly a kind of communication device. This grid and its power amazes man, and they become servants to the Nephilim. And then God destroys the earth with a flood to kill the Nephilim, and now maybe the earth tilting 23 degrees, the Nephilim technology no longer works as it did before. After the flood, the Nephilim are back at it, trying to get this grid of theirs back up and running to continue to try to bring mankind back under their rule. Since God has already promised to never flood the earth again, he changes the language in order to stop mankind from helping to build the tower for the Nephilim. This is a wild-ass theory, but I would like your thoughts on it nonetheless. If this doesn't fit into your discussions or if it's too long, a Discord message would be just fine. From Eric. Thanks for the amazing show, you two. Godspeed and snacks!
Watcher has something. What's up?
So it is something that we've talked about on and off the show a lot of times, the meaning of the Tower of Babel story. But I was actually just struck by the life and times of Louis Wu in the Ring world, where as they've technologically advanced, they've all sort of become like a standard shade of skin tone. They all have blended and they all speak the same language. As technology advances and the world becomes smaller, you hit a point where everybody speaks a standardized language. So maybe it's a indication of the advancement of the people who are building the tower and the glory, that when God shatters them, he goes, oh yeah, and by the way, no more of that.
Yeah, and it's also weird because it seems like the flood would have done this, right? It's strange that a couple of hundred years, supposedly
600 roughly,
600 years after the complete destruction of the planet, according to the story, that everybody's back with one language and they're all working together. Like, how did that happen?
Well, to mythology hop a little bit, if you go to the Anunnaki and think of them as intermediate gods, perhaps, like with capital G Anu, and so they're up watching the flood. I guess you could call it Mount Shinar. I don't know. And then
they came out of the mountains and settled in the land of Shinar. Sumer.
Oh, there you go. So maybe you have like intermediate gods, lowercase g's, that survive and then, go, yeah, we kind of liked it the way it was. And then go back through.
Yeah, it just seems interesting that it's like, that it's that short after a global catastrophe that people are all back together. They're all speaking one language and they're all working together. And then they have to be scattered again. I don't know. It's strange.
Yeah. Yeah, but the theory sounds very Sitchin-esque. Mm-hmm. There's just so much in there. There's so many different pieces to that theory that you change one of them and it just kind of falls apart. I don't know. It's interesting. I just don't think any of that is really necessary, I guess, for what's written in the text to be. What am I trying to say? It could involve the Nephilim, and this is all, talking about technologically advanced beings that are coming around and running everything. I just don't know. I mean, it sounds to me like I guess I lean more towards the idea that this is talking about a natural event.
Yeah.
Again, right? Another type of destruction that's natural. And of course, it would be attributed to God, the creator of the universe, who makes all things happen.
Right.
You know? And the result is that because people are spread out, their languages diverge. And so they're that's the confusion of tongues in a way.
Yeah. And if I remember correctly, the Nephilim aren't the fallen angels, right? They're like the offspring of the offspring, or something like that.
Right. They're the offspring.
Yeah. And I don't know what that I'm not even sure what that means. Like if you once you're like, okay, there's God and angels, and then some of them get kicked down here. Well, what are you talking about?
Yeah.
Like what exactly is that really? Because I'm not sure that I would believe that like the creator of the universe kicked some like supreme immortal beings down here, and they that's like that story. I'm just like, okay, what is this actually telling us?
Yeah, exactly.
So I don't know. It's possible, but like Kyle says, it does sound Sitchin-esque, and it's interesting to think about. But I agree that I lean towards natural phenomena. And I mean, yeah, the idea of there being giants is something I go with for sure. And they may have been called the Nephilim. And we know based, from, well, we don't know, but the idea that hybridization can cause vast size disparities in offspring is an interesting one. So you end up with like the idea that humans hybridizing with another type of hominid could possibly create giants.
Yeah. Yep. Down with that idea. And I wish I could remember the term for the outsized, like the
oh yeah,
the traits that neither parent species contain that can result in the offspring. There's a particular term.
There is a term.
I can't remember what it is, but yeah, that's definitely I agree with that. I tend to these days translate those things in a much more a less sort of God Gambit type scenario.
Yeah,
really.
Yep.
But that's just me. I mean, hey, I went through a phase where I was like, it's the giant God Gambit. I don't know.
Yeah. Yep. All right. Well, only got through 2 emails this time. So.
Yeah, well, I went long on that.
That's all right. Yeah, it's all good.
All right. Well, thanks for that. We'll be right back.
That's right.
Back, ladies and gentlemen, the 10th installment for Hidden History of the Human Race by Michael Cremo and Richard Thompson. And
10th and final.
Yeah, final. And maybe all these, like the Nephilim, the Anunnaki, the Longheads, these were all just these other hominid types that we're finding in the we were all living together at one point.
Yep. Yeah, so I know this has been a long book report. Thanks to all you guys for, sticking with us on this. It's been great. Yeah, this is the final installment, and we'll be moving on to other stuff. But this stuff is really important to me.
If I like it, they liked it.
Well, I have seen some complaints. People are like, can we change the subject, guys? No, we got to finish this.
Yeah, we got to finish it.
Yeah. So, okay. So in this last section of the book, I have skipped quite a bit. I've just marked the things that I really want to get to. But this is all, for the most part, it's covering lots and lots of finds that have been attempted to be crammed into the evolutionary record.
Huh.
And they're just, the stories are so similar to each other that I felt like we didn't need to really go through all of these in detail. But I do have some selected here. And we're also going to finish up some of this stuff from China. That's what we were looking at last week. We ended with them talking about how they're using morphology to insert these discoveries into a story.
Right.
When the dating doesn't actually support any of that because the date ranges are wide or overlap, And so what they'll do is they'll say, well, let's slide this one all the way up to the most recent date that we got for it, and we'll slide this other one all the way to the oldest date we got for it, and that way it can fit into our story. When the actual data, it has a big overlap, and it doesn't necessarily, but this is how they make it look good for the textbooks.
Right.
So they say, so let us now consider a specific example of the date range problem. In 1985, Q Zhonglang reported that in 1971 and 1972, fossil teeth of Homo sapiens were found in the Yanhui cave near Tongji in the Guizhou province in southern China. The Tongji site contained a stegodon fauna. Stegodon is a type of extinct elephant, and I don't even know how to say this one. Alliropoda is a giant panda. So the Stegodon Alliropoda fauna is typical of southern China during the Middle Pleistocene. The complete fauna list for the Tongji site, given by Han Defen and Zhu Xunhua, contains 24 kinds of mammals, all of which are found in Middle and Early Pleistocene lists given by the same authors. But a great many of the genera and species listed are also known to have survived to the Late Pleistocene and into the present. The author of the report on the Tongji discoveries stated, the Yanhui cave was the first site containing fossils of Homo sapiens discovered anywhere in the province. The fauna suggests a Middle Upper Pleistocene range, but the archaeological evidence is consistent with an Upper Late Pleistocene range. In other words, the presence of Homo sapiens fossils was the determining factor in assigning a late Pleistocene age to the site. This is a clear example of dating by morphology. But according to the faunal evidence reported by Q, all that can really be said is that the age of the Homo sapiens fossils could be anywhere from Middle Pleistocene to Late Pleistocene. So yeah, I find this interesting, and there's just story after story of this over and over in this section of the book, where all of the other data points to a wide range and even a much earlier range of certain things, or in some cases a much later range, depending on what's happening, right? They find something that looks like Homo sapiens, and
it's given the later date.
It's given the latest date possible.
Yep.
Even if that kind of contradicts all the other fossils.
Yeah.
In the sediment. And that's even, how accurate is that? Dating a strata by fossil. Like, how much of this same morphological system, evolutionary morphological system, are they using to put the fossils in a date, right? The animal fossils. Like, they're doing this with humans, but do you think they don't do it with animals?
It becomes circular.
Right.
Like,
that's what I'm saying, yeah.
Yeah.
Like, why do they think that these animals are Middle Pleistocene? Is it because of their morphology?
Because of the strata that they're found in.
Right.
How do they know the strata?
How do they date the strata? Because of the animal fossils that are in there.
Because of the morphology of the animal fossils.
That's right. Exactly. Okay. So Q, in effect, extended the date ranges of some mammalian species in the Stegodon Alliropoda fauna, such as, Megapyrus augustus, from the Middle Pleistocene into the early Late Pleistocene in order to preserve an acceptable date for the Homo sapiens fossils. His evolutionary preconceptions apparently demanded this operation, and once it was carried out, the Tongji Homo sapiens, placed safely in the late Pleistocene, could then be introduced into a temporal evolutionary sequence and cited as proof of human evolution. If we place Tongji Homo sapiens in the older part of its true faunal date range in the middle Pleistocene, he would be contemporary with Homo erectus, and that would not look very good in a textbook on fossil man in China. So yeah, I feel like this is really important because they're pointing it out again. They're pointing it out for the hominids, but I don't think that I very, very much doubt that they only do this with hominids.
Right. Yeah.
Okay, so they say, we have carefully analyzed reports about several other Chinese sites, and we find that the same process of morphological dating has been used to temporally separate various kinds of hominids. But our own analysis of the faunal evidence, site stratigraphy, and paleomagnetic dating shows the date range overlaps, and we are not insisting that these beings actually coexisted. Perhaps they did, and perhaps they did not. What we are insisting on is this. Scientists should not propose that the hominids definitely did not coexist simply on the basis of their morphological diversity. Yet this is exactly what has happened. Scientists have arranged Chinese fossil hominids in a temporal evolutionary sequence primarily by their physical type. This methodology ensures that no fossil evidence shall ever fall outside the realm of evolutionary expectations. By using morphological differences in the fossils of hominids to resolve contradictory faunal, stratigraphic, chemical, radiometric, and geomagnetic datings in harmony with a favored evolutionary sequence, paleoanthropologists have allowed their preconceptions to obscure other possibilities. And that's where it becomes circular, like you said.
Yeah.
Like it can't not be what they already think it's going to be if that's the method they're going to use. You see what I'm saying? Yeah.
But it's starting to change. Like this is one of the reasons why I collected all these stories, because over and over in the articles, they're saying, well, this is unexpected. They had to have been they had to have been coexisting.
Right.
So that's already been, an accepted idea for a while, but they're in one of the scientists is saying we're going to have to throw out the old single lineage model.
Yeah.
So they're coming around to this thing, but it's like at the same time you find them talking about Java Man.
Yeah.
Right? And it's like they've built this model and they're still working on it, even though they're finally they're being forced to accept that there are finds that are outside of that model, and now the model's changing. Neanderthals getting tossed out as I don't know.
And that's good.
It's good, but it's annoying. Anyway.
Yeah, and you just have to wonder, they're probably still doing this,
Oh, yeah. I think they are.
Yeah, I just wonder, how much stronger is the the radiometric dating or the other dating techniques stronger now in terms of what they'll consider rather than morphological? And then do they do a whole bunch of different dating types until they get one that fits their morphological preconceptions?
That's another thing that happens.
Yeah. All right. Further discoveries in China. In 1956, peasants digging for fertilizer in a cave near Maba in Guangdong province, southern China, found a skull that was apparently from a primitive human being. There seems to be general agreement that the Maba skull is Homo sapiens with some Neanderthaloid features. It is easy to see that scientists, in accordance with their evolutionary expectations, would want to place the Maba specimen in the very latest Middle Pleistocene or early Late Pleistocene after Homo erectus. Although Maba might be as recent as the early Late Pleistocene, the animal bones found there were from mammals that lived not only in the late Pleistocene, but also in the middle Pleistocene and even in the early Pleistocene. The principal justification for fixing the date of the Maba cave in the very latest part of the late middle Pleistocene or in the early late Pleistocene seems to be the morphology of the hominid remains. The possibility that Homo erectus and more advanced hominids may have coexisted in China adds new fuel to the controversy about who was really responsible for the broken brain cases of Beijing Man and the presence of advanced stone tools. Did several hominids of various grades of advancement really coexist in the middle Pleistocene? We do not assert this categorically, but it is definitely within the range of possibilities suggested by the available data. In our study of the scientific literature, we have come upon no clear reason for ruling out coexistence other than the fact that the individuals are morphologically dissimilar. Okay, so what they're talking about here, if you guys don't remember, are the broken brain cases. Remember that we were reading about this last week and maybe the week before, that some people were suggesting that they were being hunted. And the cave was full of skulls and nothing else, and they were suggesting that something was hitting them on the back of the head and then bringing the head in there and eating the brains or something like that. Yeah. So they're saying, like, you know, this adds new fuel to the controversy about who was really responsible for the broken brain cases, because they were saying that Beijing Man was a cannibal. And these guys are suggesting, well, maybe it was another hominid type hunting this. Yeah. A much smarter one with a bigger brain. You know, a Homo Sapiens, closer to Homo Sapiens than Beijing Man. So some will certainly claim that the fact of human evolution has been so conclusively established beyond any reasonable doubt that it is perfectly justifiable to engage in dating hominids by their morphology. But we believe this claim does not hold up under close scrutiny. As we have demonstrated, abundant evidence contradicting current ideas about human evolution has been suppressed or forgotten. Furthermore, scientists have systematically overlooked shortcomings in the evidence that supposedly supports current evolutionary hypotheses. If peasants digging for fertilizer in a Chinese cave had uncovered a fully human skull, along with distinctly Pliocene fauna, scientists would certainly have protested that no competent observers were present to conduct adequate stratigraphic studies. But since the Maba skull could be fitted into the standard evolutionary sequence, no one objected to its mode of discovery.
Right.
Even after one learns to recognize the highly questionable practice of morphological dating, one may be astonished to note how frequently it is used. In the field of human evolution research in China, it appears to be not the exception, but the rule. The Homo sapiens upper jaw, found by workers in 1956 in South China, has provided many authorities with a welcome opportunity for unabashed morphological dating. The upper jaw, judged Homo sapiens with some primitive features, was found in association with the typical South China Middle Pleistocene fauna, including the panda and the extinct elephant. In 1962, Chang Guangqi of Yale University wrote, "This fauna is generally believed to be of Middle Pleistocene age, and the scientists working on the cave suggest a late Middle Pleistocene dating, for the morphology of the jaw shows less primitive features than does that of Sinanthropus." So it is clear that Chang's primary justification for assigning Changyang Homo sapiens a date later than Beijing Homo erectus is morphological. In 1981, J.S. Eigner joined in with her statement, "A Middle Pleistocene age is suggested by some of the fauna with the presence of the hominid, which is considered near H. sapiens, indicating a dating late in that period." So again, there you can see them saying, well, here's the range that's suggested by all the other evidence, but we're going to drag it all the way to the far end of the range because that's how it fits in our model. That scientists could confront the faunal evidence at Shenyang without even considering the possibility that Homo sapiens coexisted in China with Homo erectus is amazing. In this regard, Sir Arthur Keith wrote in 1931, "It has so often happened in the past that the discovery of human remains in a deposit has influenced expert opinions as to its age. The tendency has been to interpret geological evidence so that it would not clash flagrantly with the theory of man's recent origins. In 1958, workers found human fossils in the Liujiang cave in the Guangxi Zhuang Autonomous Region of South China. These include a skull, a vertebrae, ribs, pelvic bone, and a right femur. These anatomically modern human remains were found along with a typical Stegodon Aryliopoda fauna, giving a date range for the site of the entire Middle Pleistocene. But Chinese scientists assigned the human bones to the late Pleistocene, primarily because of their advanced morphology.
Yep. And this is going to be really hard to undo.
Yeah.
Right? Because it's like those papers are not being necessarily like scrutinized for the details anymore. It's just like, okay, this is kind of the general idea of development. Now they're finding new stuff that is making them have to realize that, like, okay, so some of these maybe are not direct ancestors and blah, blah, blah. But it's like to unravel all that stuff is just going to be, I don't know. It's going to be really difficult. Especially when it's been written into textbooks as like, this is what the deal is.
Yeah. And again, I point out, like, because human origins are so much more interesting and thus controversial, they get a lot more scrutiny. But I just imagine that this goes on with all the animals too.
Well, it definitely happens with artifacts, like stone artifacts.
Oh,
right?
yeah,
we know that
for sure, yeah.
You know, somebody shows you some arrowhead they found, and then you look it up in a book, and it's like, oh yeah, that thing that's about 7,000, whatever years old or whatever it is, and it's just based on the morphology.
Yep.
But there's no reason why people 1,000 years ago might have found those same types of artifacts and recreated some of them for themselves.
Right.
So yeah, it definitely happens in other places.
All right. Let's see. So in attempting to sort out this Middle Pleistocene hominid logjam, scientists have repeatedly used the morphology of the hominid fossils to select desirable dates within the total possible faunal date ranges of the sites. In this way, they have been able to preserve an evolutionary progression of hominids. Remarkably, this artificially constructed sequence, designed to fit evolutionary expectations, is then cited as proof of the evolutionary hypothesis. And that's true. Like when I've tried to discuss this with people, you just see people say it, like they're just like, this is established, and this timeline is established, but they don't realize that timeline has been built by using preconceived ideas about how that timeline should look.
Right.
So then they'll point to it and say, look, this is very established. And you're like, yeah, but it's actually not. It's way more fuzzy than that.
It's warm and fuzzy.
It is. It's warm and fuzzy. All right. So I'm going to skip a whole bunch here where they're basically going through this same problem over and over and over again. Okay. So he says, this ends our review of discoveries in China. We have seen that age determinations of fossil hominids have been distorted by morphological dating. When these ages are adjusted to reflect reasonable faunal date ranges, the total evidence fails to exclusively support an evolutionary hypothesis. Rather, the evidence appears also consistent with the proposal that anatomically modern human beings have coexisted with a variety of human-like creatures throughout the Pleistocene.
Yeah, that's the key right there.
Yeah.
The evidence also supports that idea.
Yes, that's right. It only doesn't support it when you ignore.
That's right. It could be either way. They could be right.
They could totally be right.
But the evidence also completely supports the idea that they were just
coexisting.
Yeah.
And that doesn't like disprove evolution. It just means it's a much more interesting and complicated process.
Yeah.
And maybe something more like along the lines of punctuated evolution, you know?
Yeah.
They actually talk about that later on in the book. I don't remember if I marked it, but they do talk about how some people have this idea of punctuated evolution that evolution actually happens very quickly over short periods of time, and then there's long periods of stability. You know, and so it's possible that all of this Pleistocene era hominid fossils represent a long period of stability in multiple hominid species that were coexisting. And they've been trying to build a morphological sequence from what they consider to be, this is primitive up to what they consider to be modern, basically looking at like, okay, here's basically an ape skull, and then here's a human skull, and then we should have this sequence of movement from that to this over a long period of time. But it's possible that the human skull happened very quickly. In other words, that all of these things began, in a period of
like they diversified very quickly and then coexisted for a long period of time.
Yeah, right.
I just want to read this quote from this article I got. This is from 2015 about a new species of ancient human found. This is a BBC article, but this quote. This scientist says, historically, because we didn't have the fossil evidence to show there was hominin diversity during the Middle Pleistocene, we thought there was only one lineage, one primitive ancestor, in this case, Australopithecus afarensis, Lucy, giving rise to the next. That hypothesis of linear evolution has to be revisited. And now with the discovery of more species like this new one, you have another species roaming around. What this means is that we have many species that could give rise to later hominins, including our own genus. So,
yeah, there you go.
He says more fossils have to be on Earth to better understand the path that human evolution took. But it's true. But what he's not saying is the main point that the author is pointing out, that like the reason you got this story in the first place was by preconceived notions. And
yeah, that's right.
But yeah, they are saying it needs to be revisited, so that's good.
Yeah, that is good. Oh, we didn't start the sands of time.
Nah, but we got a little bit. We got about 10 minutes almost.
Okay. All right. Unexpected Sasquatch. This is how I felt when I got to this part of the book. I was like, oh yeah, there's a whole section in here about Sasquatch. I completely forgot about this. So this is chapter 11 here, called Living Ape Men, ? Reviewing the fossil hominids of China, we found signs that humans may have coexisted with more ape-like hominids throughout the Pleistocene. This may be true even today. Over the past 100 or so years, researchers have accumulated substantial evidence that creatures resembling Neanderthals, Homo erectus, and the Australopithecines, even now, roam wilderness areas of the world. Professional scientists have 1. Observed wild men in natural surroundings, 2. Observed live captured specimens, 3. Observed dead specimens, and 4. Collected physical evidence for wild men, including hundreds of footprints. They have also interviewed non-scientist informants and investigated the vast amount of wildman lore contained in the ancient literatures and traditions.
Huh. Wow.
So, cryptozoology. For some researchers, the study of creatures such as wildmen comes under the heading of a genuine branch of science called cryptozoology. Cryptozoology, a term coined by the French zoologist Bernard something, refers to the scientific investigation of species whose existence have been reported but not fully documented. The Greek word kryptos means hidden, so cryptozoology literally means the study of hidden animals. There exists an international society of cryptozoology, the board of directors of which includes professional biologists, zoologists, and paleontologists from universities and museums around the world. The purpose of the society, as stated in its journal Cryptozoology, is the investigation, analysis, publication, and discussion of all matters related to animals of unexpected form or size, or unexpected occurrence in time or space. A typical issue of cryptozoology usually contains one or more articles by scientists on the topic of wild men. Is it really possible that there could be an unknown species of hominid on this planet? Many will find this hard to believe for two reasons. They suppose that every inch of the Earth has been quite thoroughly explored, and they also suppose that scientists possess a complete inventory of the Earth's living animal species. Both suppositions are incorrect. First, even in countries such as the United States, there remain vast, unpopulated, and little-traveled areas. In particular, the northwestern United States still has large regions of densely forested, mountainous terrain which, although mapped from the air, are rarely penetrated by humans on the ground. Second, a surprising number of new species of animals are still being found each year, about 5,000, according to a conservative estimate. As might be suspected, the great majority of these, some 4,000 of them, are insects. Yet, Wildman's in 1983 noted, quite recently, in the mid-1970s, there were discovered each year around 112 new species of fish, 18 new species of reptiles, 10 new species of amphibians, the same number of mammals, and 3 or 4 new species of birds. So, European wildmen.
And brings to the question again, the term species.
Yes, it does. Right. Like, are these really just undiscovered, or have they just shown up?
That's right. Or were the people discovering them using different definitions of the word species?
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, that's true as well. I assume that they're defining them mostly by morphology, right?
Yeah.
By visual anatomical characteristics. Yeah. All right. I'll read this one short section on European wildmen, and then we can take a break.
All right.
Reports of wild men go back a long time. Many art objects of the Greeks, Romans, Carthaginians, and Etruscans bear images of semi-human creatures. For example, in the Museum of Prehistory in Rome, there is an Etruscan silver bowl on which may be seen, among human hunters on horses, the figure of a large ape-man-like creature. During the Middle Ages, wild men continued to be depicted in European art and architecture. A page from Queen Mary's Psalter, composed in the 14th century, shows a very realistically depicted hairy wild man being attacked by a pack of dogs.
Wow.
All right, we'll take a break, and then we'll get to the northwestern North America section on Sasquatch.
Squatch!
Back, ladies and gentlemen, Brothers of the Serpent podcast, part 10 of this book, long book report, longest ever. Part 10, final part, Hidden History of the Human Race. You guys really should go get this book. We've read enormous chunks of it, but still not all of it, and it's really good to have as a reference, or even just get the original tome, Forbidden Archaeology.
Yeah.
You want all the references and geological arguments and stuff like that.
I wonder if that's the one I got originally, because I listened to it, like the PDF.
Oh, yeah?
I remember stuff but maybe you just skipped some of the stuff that I remember.
Possibly.
That's probably what happened.
Yeah.
Lock 9 Porter.
All right.
Of Hollow Brewing Company.
Brewpastor Beers.
Thank you, Brewpastor.
Yeah, and we were prepping for the show with some old Snake Forest coffee, right?
That's right.
Yep.
I got my coffee over here. Iced, refreshing, and my beer.
Yep. All right, I just finished my coffee. Okay. Northwestern North America. from the middle, late, early Pleistocene. For centuries, the Indians of the northwestern United States and western Canada have believed in the reality of wildmen, known by various names such as Sasquatch. In 1792, the Spanish botanist-naturalist José Mariano Mazinho, describing the Indians of Nootka Sound on Vancouver Island in Canada, stated, "I do not know what to say about Matlocks, inhabitants of the mountainous district, of whom all have an unbelievable terror. They imagine his body as very monstrous, all covered with stiff black bristles, a head similar to a human one, but with much greater, sharper, and stronger fangs than those of the bear, extremely long arms and toes and fingers armed with long, curved claws."
He started out sounding like a mix between a human and a wild boar.
Yeah, he did. And I guess they called it the Matlocks. I'm probably not pronouncing it right. Matlox. Yeah, the claws. And the like pointed teeth and tusks and stuff. U.S. President Theodore Roosevelt included an intriguing wildman report in his 1906 book, The Wilderness Hunter. This incident took place in the Bitterroot Mountains between Idaho and Montana. Wildman reports still come out of this region. According to Roosevelt, in the early to middle 1800s, a trapper named Bauman and his partner were exploring a particularly wild and lonely pass. An unknown creature ravaged their camp several times at night when they could not see the large animal clearly, and in the day when they were absent. One day, Bauman found his partner dead in the camp, apparently killed by the creature. The creature left footprints that were quite human-like. And unlike a bear, which normally walks on all four legs, this creature walked on two legs. Oh, man. Taken on its own, the Bauman story is not very impressive as evidence for the existence of wild men in North America. But when considered along with the more substantive reports, it acquires a greater significance. And yeah, you know, I've read lots of stories like this, and people are always like, well, he just killed his, killed his partner and claimed it was a wild man, right? On July 4th, 1884, The Colonist, a newspaper published in Victoria, British Columbia, carried a story about a strange creature captured near the town of Yale. The Colonist reported, "Jacko, as the creature has been called by his capturers, is something of the gorilla type, standing about 4 feet 7 inches in height and weighing 127 pounds. He has long, black, strong hair and resembles a human being with one exception. His entire body, excepting his hands and feet, is covered with a glossy hair about 1 inch long. His forearm is much longer than a man's forearm, and he possesses extraordinary strength." That the creature was not a gorilla seems clear. Its weight was too small. Some might suppose that Jacko was a chimpanzee, but this idea was apparently considered and rejected by persons who were familiar with Jacko. In 1961, zoologist Ivan Sanderson mentioned a comment made in another paper shortly after the original story was published, in which asked how anybody could suggest that this Jacko could have been a chimpanzee that had escaped from a circus. Additional reports of creatures like Jacko came from the same region. For example, Alexander Caulfield Anderson, a surveyor for the Hudson Bay Company, reported that some hairy humanoid creatures had several times thrown rocks at his party as they surveyed a trade route in 1864. Wow. In 1901, Mike King, a well-known lumberman, was working in an isolated region in northern Vancouver Island. As King came over a ridge, he spotted a large, human-like creature covered with reddish-brown fur. On the bank of a creek, the creature was washing some roots and placing them in two orderly piles beside him. The creature then left, running like a human being. Footprints observed by King were distinctly human, except for the phenomenally long and spreading toes. In 1941, several members of the Chapman family encountered a wild man at Ruby Creek in British Columbia. On a sunny summer afternoon, Mrs. Chapman's oldest son alerted her to the presence of a large animal coming down out of the woods near their home. At first, she thought it was a large bear, But then, much to her horror, she saw that it was a gigantic man covered all over with yellow-brown hair. So again, we have this the bear similarity, right? The hair was about 4 inches long. The creature moved directly towards the house, and Mrs. Chapman rounded up her 3 children and fled downstream to the village. In October of 1955, Mr. William Rowe, who had spent much of his life hunting wild animals and observing their habits, encountered a wild man. The incident took place near a little town called Tetwankash in British Columbia. One day, said Rowe in a sworn statement, he climbed up Mica Mountain to an old deserted mine and saw, at a distance of about 75 yards, what he first took to be a bear. When the creature stepped out into a clearing, Rowe realized it was something different. My first impression was of a huge man, about 6 feet tall, almost 3 feet wide, and probably weighing somewhere near 300 pounds. Wow. It was covered from head to foot with dark brown, silver-tipped hair. But as I came closer, I saw by its breasts that it was female. In 1967, in the Bluff Creek region of Northern California, Roger Patterson and Bob Gimlin managed to shoot a short color film of a female Sasquatch. They also made casts of her footprints, which were 14 inches long. That's the famous Patterson-Gimlin footage. That's what we showed Sol when we asked him.
Oh, yeah.
Several opinions have been expressed about this film. While some authorities have said it is an outright fake, others have said they think it provides good evidence in favor of the reality of the Sasquatch. Mixed opinions have also been put forward. Dr. W.D. Grieve, an anatomist specializing in human walking, studied the film and had this to say. My subjective impressions have oscillated between total acceptance of the Sasquatch on the grounds that the film would be difficult to fake, to one of irrational rejection based on an emotional response to the possibility that Sasquatch actually exists.
I just realized that, like, in all of the artist depictions of these, like these sort of hominin precursors, like this one, this new, they're all bare-chested and stuff.
Right.
None of them look like Sasquatch, dude.
Right.
Is that on purpose? Because,
I don't know. That's a good point. Anthropologist Myra Shackley of the University of Leicester observed that the majority view seems to be that the film could be a hoax, but if so, an incredibly clever one. But this explanation could be used to dismiss almost any kind of scientific evidence whatsoever. All one has to do is posit a sufficiently expert hoaxer. Therefore, the hoax hypothesis should be applied only when there is actual evidence of hoaxing, such as at Piltdown, for example. Ideally, one should be able to produce the hoaxer. Furthermore, even a demonstrated case of hoaxing cannot be used to dismiss entire categories of similar evidence. Lester, okay. Watcher says it's pronounced Lester. Thanks, Watcher. As far as Sasquatch footprints are concerned, independent witnesses have examined and reported hundreds of sets. And of these, more than 100 have been preserved in photographs and casts. Critics, however, assert that all these footprints have been faked. Undoubtedly, some footprints have been faked, a fact the staunchest supporters of the Sasquatch will readily admit. But could every single one of them be a hoax? In 1973, John R. Napier, a respected British anatomist, stated that if all the prints are fakes, then we must be prepared to accept the existence of a conspiracy of mafia-like ramifications with cells in practically every major township from San Francisco to Vancouver.
That was good.
Yeah. Napier declared that he found the prints he himself studied biologically convincing. He wrote, "The evidence that I have examined persuades me that some of the tracks are real and that they are man-like in form. I am convinced that the Sasquatch exists." Grover S. Krantz, an anthropologist at Washington State University, was initially skeptical of Sasquatch reports. In order to determine whether or not the creature really existed, he studied in detail some prints found in 1970 in northeastern Washington state. In reconstructing the skeletal structure of the foot from the print, he noticed that the ankle was positioned more forward than in a human foot. Taking into consideration the reported height and weight of an adult Sasquatch, Krantz, using his knowledge of physical anthropology, calculated just how far forward the ankle would have to be set. Returning to the prints, he found that the position of the ankle exactly matched his theoretical calculations. "That's when I decided this thing is real," said Krantz. "There is no way a faker could have known how far forward to set that ankle. It took me a couple of months to work it out with the casts in hand. So you have to figure how much smarter a faker would have had to be."
Wow, that's interesting.
Yeah. Krantz and wildman expert John Green have written extensive reports on the North American footprint evidence. Typically, the prints are 14 to 18 inches long and 5 to 9 inches wide, giving a surface roughly 3 to 4 times larger than that of an average human foot, hence the popular name Bigfoot. Krantz estimated that to make typical Sasquatch prints, a total weight of 700 pounds is required.
Man.
Thus, a 200-pound man would have to be carrying at least 500 pounds to make a good print. And that is only the beginning. There are reports of series of prints extending from 3/4 of a mile up to several miles in deserted regions far away from the nearest roads. The stride length of a Sasquatch varies from 4 to 6 feet. The stride length of an average man is about 3. Try walking a mile with 500 pounds on your back and taking strides 5 feet long, which is what you'd have to do to fake those prints. A footprint machine, a kind of mechanical stamp, has been suggested, stated Napier, but an apparatus capable of delivering a thrust of approximately 800 pounds per square foot that can be manhandled over rough and mountainous country puts a strain on one's credulity. Some of the reported series of tracks were in fresh snow, enabling observers to verify that no other marks were made by some machine paralleling the prints or hovering over them. In some cases, the distance between the toes of the footprints varied from one print to the next in a single series of prints. This means that besides all the other problems facing a hoaxer, he would have to have incorporated moving parts into the artificial feet. On June 10th, 1982, Paul Freeman, a U.S. Forest Service patrolman tracking elk in the Walla Walla district of Washington State, observed a hairy biped around 8 feet tall, standing 60 yards from him. After 30 seconds, the large animal walked away. Krantz studied casts of the creature's footprints and found dermal ridges, sweat pores, and other features in the proper places for large primate feet. Detailed skin impressions on the sidewalls of the prints indicated the presence of a flexible sole pad. In the face of much good evidence, why do almost all anthropologists and zoologists remain silent about Sasquatch? Krantz observed, "They are scared for their reputations and their jobs." And Napier similarly noted, "One of the problems, perhaps the greatest problem, in investigating Sasquatch sightings is the suspicion with which people who claim to have seen a Sasquatch are treated by their neighbors and employers. To admit such an experience is, in some areas, to risk personal reputation, social status, and professional credibility." And particularly, he told of the case of a highly qualified oil company geologist who told his story but insisted that his name should not be mentioned for fear of dismissal by his company. In this regard, Roderick Sprague, an anthropologist from the University of Idaho, said of Krantz, "It is Krantz's willingness to openly investigate the unknown that has cost him the respect of many colleagues as well as timely academic promotion." Does it sound familiar? It's the same stuff that happens to people with UFOs.
Yep.
And I just wonder, like, what causes this? I wonder, what causes it?
I want to see some good video. It's got to happen.
Of Sasquatch?
I mean, if they're really out there,
Yeah.
somebody's going to capture really good video footage of it
Yeah.
at some point.
Yep. And I mean, the Patterson-Gimlin film was really good video
at the time.
For the time, yeah. The majority of Sasquatch reports come from the northwestern United States and British Columbia. One is forced to conclude, said Napier, that a man-like life form of gigantic proportions is living at the present time in the wild areas of the northwestern United States and British Columbia. There are also numerous reports from the eastern parts of the United States and Canada. That such a creature should be alive and kicking in our midst, unrecognized and unclassified, is a profound blow to the credibility of modern anthropology, concluded Napier. It might also be said that it is a blow to the credibility of biology, zoology, and science in general. Central and South America. From southern Mexico's tropical forests come accounts of beings called the Sisamite. Wendell Skousen, a geologist, said the people of Cubalco in Baja report there live in the mountains very big, wild men, completely clothed in short, thick, brown, hairy fur, with no necks, small eyes, long arms, and huge hands. They leave footprints twice the length of a man's. Several persons said that they had been chased down mountainsides by these beings. Skousen thought the creatures might have been a bear. However, upon questioning the natives carefully, he decided it was not. And similar creatures are reported in Guatemala, where it has been said they kidnap women and children. And that's also true of Sasquatch reports here.
Yeah, it makes you think 411, dude.
I know, yeah, exactly. All right, the Yeti, wild men of the Himalayas. Writings of British officials residing in the Himalayan region of the Indian subcontinent during the 19th century contain sporadic references to sightings and footprints of wild men called Yeti. The Yeti were first mentioned by B.H. Hodgson, who from 1820 to 1843 served as British resident at the Nepalese court. Hodgson reported that in the course of a journey through northern Nepal, his bearers were frightened by the sight of a hairy, tailless, human-like creature. Many will suggest, on hearing a report like this, and hundreds have been recorded since Hodgson's time, that the Nepalese mistook an ordinary animal for a Yeti. The usual candidates for mistaken identity are bears and the langur monkey. But it is hard to imagine that lifelong residents of the Himalayas, intimately familiar with the wildlife, would have made such a mistake. Myra Shackley observed that Yeti are found in Nepalese and Tibetan religious paintings depicting hierarchies of living beings. Here, said Shackley, bears, apes, and langurs are depicted separate from the wild men, suggesting there is no confusion, at least in the minds of the artists, between these forms. In November of 1951, Eric Shipton, while reconnoitering, is that how you say that? Reconnoitering? I have no idea.
I think so.
Is that right?
I mean, that's the way I've always pronounced it. I don't know if that's right, but
surveying the approaches to Mount Everest, found footprints in the Minlung Glacier near the border between Tibet and Nepal at an elevation of 18,000 feet. Shipton followed the trail for a mile. A close-up photograph of one of the prints has proved convincing to many. The footprints were quite large. John R. Napier considered and rejected the possibility that the particular size and shape of the best Shipton footprint could have been caused by melting of the snow. In the end, Napier suggested that the Shipton footprint was the result of superimposed human feet, one shod and the other unshod. In general, Napier, who was fully convinced of the existence of the North American Sasquatch, was highly skeptical for the evidence for the Yeti. But, as we shall see later in this section, new evidence would cause Napier to become more inclined to accept the Himalayan wildmen. So yeah, I've seen this too, where, they suggest that a normal person takes a step, and then the snow melts, and the footprints appears to grow enormous.
Right, yeah.
But who's walking through snow barefoot? That's the next question. In the course of his expeditions to the Himalayan mountains in the 1950s and 1960s, Sir Edmund Hillary gave attention to evidence for the Yeti, including footprints in snow. he concluded that in every case, the large footprints attributed to the Yeti had been produced by the merging of smaller tracks of known animals. To this, Napier, himself a skeptic, replied, "No one with any experience would confuse a melted footprint with a fresh one. Not all the prints seen over the years by reputable observers can be explained away in these terms. There must be other explanations for footprints, including, of course, the possibility that they were made by an animal unknown to science." In March of 1986, Anthony B. Wooldridge was making a solo run through the Himalayas of northernmost India on behalf of a small third-world development organization. While proceeding along a forested, snow-covered slope near Hemkund, he noticed fresh tracks and took photographs of them, including a close-up of a single print that resembled the one photographed by Eric Shipton in 1951. Pressing onward, Wooldridge came to a recent avalanche and saw a shallow furrow apparently caused by a large object sliding across the snow. At the end of the furrow, he saw more tracks, which led to a distant shrub, behind which stood a large, erect shape, perhaps up to 2 meters tall, which is about 6 feet. Wooldridge, realizing this might be a Yeti, moved to within 150 meters and took photos. "It was standing with its legs apart," he stated, "apparently looking down the slope with its right shoulder turned towards me. The head was large and squarish, and the whole body appeared to be covered with dark hair. In Wooldridge's opinion, the creature was definitely not a monkey or a bear or a ordinary human being." Wooldridge observed the creature for 45 minutes, but he had to leave when the weather worsened. On the way back to his base, he took more photographs of the footprints, but by this time they had become distorted by melting. On his return to England, Wooldridge showed his photographic evidence to scientists interested in the wildmen question, including John Napier. At a distance of 150 meters, the creature appeared quite small on the 35mm film, but enlargements did show something human-like. Describing the reactions of those who saw his photos, Wooldridge stated, "John Napier, a primatologist and author of the 1973 book Bigfoot, the Yeti, and Sasquatch in Myth and Reality, has reversed the skeptical position he previously expressed and now describes himself as a Yeti devotee. Myra Shackley, an archaeologist and author of the 1983 book Wildmen, Yeti, Sasquatch, and the Neanderthal Enigma, has seen the full sequence of photographs and believes that the whole experience is very consistent with other reports of Yeti sightings. Lord Hunt, leader of the successful 1953 Mount Everest expedition, who has twice seen Yeti tracks himself, is similarly convinced." So yeah, people have gotten photos. They're just, those are older ones, but yeah, I was reading through this and wondering what happened here, right? It sounds like he's walking along and he starts seeing prints. And then he comes around and sees a recent avalanche and this long furrow. Like the avalanche made the thing fall and slide.
Yeah.
And then the furrow ends and then the footprints start again. Like it slid down the hill after the avalanche happened and then walked off and ended up behind a bush, and where he crept up to it and watched it for 45 minutes before leaving.
We need to go find one.
Yeah.
We need to go looking for some.
Yeah. Where would they be around here?
I don't know. We have a town nearby called Bigfoot.
That's true.
But it's named after a guy who's just like...
That's right. That's
historical character. But when I first saw that sign, I was like, what?
That's right. I mean, there was a Bigfoot sighting in San Antonio not too long ago.
Really?
Yeah. I remember hearing about it. Yeah.
Huh. In the
and
city?
they saw it on 1604 out there where it was, there was a Sasquatch sighting out there.
What was he doing there?
I don't know.
I had to go pick up some groceries from H-E-B.
Possibly. All right. We're skipping here to, I guess, the Caucasus. Yeah. In 1941, V.S. Karapetyan, a lieutenant colonel of the medical service of the Soviet Army, performed a direct physical examination of a living wild man captured in the Dagestan Autonomous Republic, just north of the Caucasus Mountains. He said, "I entered a shed with 2 members of the local authorities. I can still see the creature as it stood before me, a male, naked and barefooted. It was doubtlessly a man because its entire shape was human, but the chest, back, and shoulders were covered with shaggy hair of a dark brown color. This fur was much like that of a bear and was 2 to 3 centimeters or 1 inch long. The fur was thinner and softer below the chest. His wrists were crude and sparsely covered with hair. The palms of his hands and soles of his feet were free of hair, but the hair on his head reached to his shoulders, partly covering the forehead. The hair on his head, moreover, felt very rough to the hand. He had no beard or mustache, though his face was completely covered with a light growth of hair. The hair around his mouth was also short and sparse. He stood absolutely straight with his arms hanging, and his height was above average, about 180 centimeters, which is about 5 feet 11 inches. He stood before me like a giant, his chest thrust forward. His fingers were thick, strong, and exceptionally large. On the whole, he was considerably bigger than any of the local inhabitants. His eyes told me nothing. They were dull and empty, the eyes of an animal. And he seemed to me like an animal and nothing more." It is reports like this that have led scientists such as British anthropologist Myra Shackley to conclude that Almas may represent surviving Neanderthals or perhaps even Homo erectus. So the Alma is the name that they give the creature in Russia, in these areas of Russia. What happened to the wild man of Dagestan? According to published accounts, he was shot by his Soviet military captors as they retreated before the advancing German army. Wildmen of China. Chinese historical documents and many city and town records contain abundant records of wildmen, which are given various names, states Zhu Gyozing of the Beijing Museum of Natural History. Even today, in the area of Feng County in the Hubei province, there are still legends about Maoren, or hairy men, or wild men. In 1940, Wang Zalin, a graduate of the biology department of Northwestern University in Chicago, was able to directly see a wild man shortly after it was shot to death by hunters. He was driving from Baoji in Shaanxi province to Tianshui in Gansu province when he heard gunfire ahead of him. He got out of the car to satisfy his curiosity and saw a corpse. It was a female creature, 6.5 feet tall, covered with a coat of thick grayish-red hair about 1 1/4 inches long. The hair on its face was shorter. The cheekbones were prominent, the lips jutted out, and the hair on the head was about 1 foot long. According to Wang, the creature looked like a reconstruction of the Chinese Homo erectus.
Man, I was thinking about that. This dragon man skull that was found in 1933 that they just dug out of the river. Like, they don't know how old, right, I mean, they did some dating on it, so maybe they do, but it occurred to me that it's like, what if that was like a recent
a recent Sasquatch
skull.
And I've wondered, like, listen to how big they are in North America. Like, could these be responsible for, like, the long-head giants?
Yeah,
are
exactly.
Found? I mean, like, is it just Sasquatch being buried with the Native Americans in some cases? Because they were, like, there are plenty of Native American stories where they're like, they're like a tribe of people, and we've traded with them, and, they're kind of secretive, but could they have ended up in some of their burial mounds somehow? And so we dig them out, and all we see is the skeleton, and you're like, wow, this dude was, like, 8 feet tall and had this weird-shaped head. And it was just Sasquatch.
Yeah, exactly.
I was hanging out with the Indians.
That's cool.
Yeah. All right.
Cool stuff.
Yeah.
Unexpected Sasquatch.
Unexpected Sasquatch. The end of hidden history. The human race.
And we'll be right back.
That's right.
Again. I'm buying it. I don't know. After all this, going through all this stuff in this book, he did a really good job throwing in Sam Squanch here at the end.
Yeah.
I'm totally buying it.
And you see what the point is, right? It's pretty clear that because he spends pretty much the entire book until this final chapter saying, look at all this evidence for modern Homo sape in very ancient periods.
Right.
And now he's showing you, look at this evidence for what could be considered ancient human types in the modern period.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep. But part of that, is just the sort of deconstruction of the standard model.
Yeah.
Right. This is what happens when you spend enough time looking into the holes. Eventually, you realize, okay, I can't really rely on that.
Yeah.
And so it kind of throws everything up in the air, and you're like, all right.
Yep.
Then when you look again with these eyes at some other aspect that you may have discounted in the past, now you're like, wow, okay, that actually might be possible.
Yeah. And that's what I was saying when I was asking, like, why is Sasquatch considered to be career destroying, or I think it's because of this standard model. That's what I'm trying to say. The reason why it's considered to be ridiculous is because everybody's pretty much got this picture in their head of how we developed, and the idea that there could be basically a missing link still living. If that's what Sasquatch is, that it appears to be some kind of ape man. Which is effectively a missing link, or not even missing. Just it's like it's between apes and humans, and those are supposed to be distant ancestors, not modern living creatures.
Yeah,
and this is why it's relegated to the realm of cryptozoology and hoaxery, and like this. It's automatically debunked because it doesn't fit the model.
Yeah, and maybe I have this idea wrong in my head, but the idea that the evolutionary process is caused by environmental pressures.
Yeah.
Right? Like environmental pressures sort of cause the slow adaptation to new things or whatever, which results in the overall idea of evolution. But you have this, the Pleistocene period, which is gigantic, and there was a lot of different, changing environments, but you have all these other animals that stay pretty much the same.
Yeah, they're stable.
They're stable all the way through it. What were the environmental pressures on the hominids that were causing such rapid changes in their morphology? And then the idea that if you just assume that you don't need the environmental pressures to have these mutations over time, then why did anything ever stay the same for any length of time? Why do we still have these extremely ancient forms of these animals? Why are they not gone? Right?
Yeah.
I don't know. It's weird.
Yeah, I see what you're saying. Like, why do we still have like crocodiles or something?
Yeah, and cockroaches and stuff.
Yeah.
And ants.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know.
And so the way I would imagine it working is that you would have environmental pressures, like especially if something is sort of going to a different habitat area, like if there's travel involved, right? And you go into a different geographic region, that would induce changes that were not in the original, ancestral species that is still remaining in the place that it was.
Right. Okay.
So you have branches.
Yeah.
And I just don't understand why. To me, it seems logical to assume that the parent species or the ancestors would continue to live unless the environment changed to somehow make them
change,
not viable.
Yeah.
So why do we have chimpanzees but not the missing links between, right? Where
Yeah.
what were the environmental changes that just made it impossible for all of the missing links to continue to exist?
Yeah.
Maybe it was overkill. It's like once Homo Sapiens Sapiens came about, we were like, let's go eat all the other guys. I don't know. It's just
Overkill
weird.
cannibals. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. I was thinking about this too. Like, why is there this long period of stability with the animals, and yet the hominid species are going through these rapid changes? Like
Right, that's what I'm
you brought
saying.
that question up, yeah, and like what is causing the rapid changes in hominids
Right,
when all the animals are basically staying stable?
Because if it was environmental pressure, then all the animals should have been changing as well.
Yeah, yeah,
Unless they were just all better suited for a wide range of environments. Why wouldn't the hominids already have that
could it have
built in?
been? I mean, I guess you could, yeah. So sort of what you're saying, overkill. Like the argument would be that the environmental pressure was them fighting with each other.
Yeah, something like that.
And so like the ones that end up surviving are the ones that could kill off all the other ones the best.
Right.
And I don't know. I mean, then there's all the interbreeding, right?
Yeah.
So is there something about an intelligent creature that makes it easier for them to interbreed with each other than other animals? Like because I'm thinking of hybridization again, right? So hybridization, there's this idea that at the edges of a population, there will be some attempts at interbreeding, whether they work or not.
Yeah.
But the more intelligent, like is it because in the end these hominids are more likely to interbreed with each other somehow?
Or are they more likely to migrate?
And they're definitely more likely to migrate. Yeah.
Like, screw this, man, I'm out.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
I'm going to go up on that mountain.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. What's over that mountain?
Maybe that's what it is, right? Like they get they're more curious,
Yeah.
and so they go exploring,
Yeah.
and they find
It's exploration. Yeah. I mean, like the curiosity, like things are curious, but not in the same way of like, man, wonder what's on the other side of that mountain. Yeah. Yeah. Or maybe if I just walk this beach for a really long time, I'll find something cool, right? And you just do it for years, and then you end up in a totally different area.
Yeah, that could be a part of the rapid development. But then why did it stop?
Yeah.
Or has it, maybe it's just the time periods are too long. It seems to have stopped, though.
Yeah, it does seem to have stopped.
Unless, yeah, I mean, they're now finding, they found some possible other species of hominid in China that's in the Holocene.
Yeah. That's interesting.
Or it's like right at the Younger Dryas period. So I don't know. It's just weird.
And notice how these all these Sasquatches around the world, they're different. The North
Right,
American
yeah,
ones are
they're
like
not the same,
huge,
yeah.
Right. So you have these. It's like they seem to have a phenotype that is based on where they are.
The thing that's most likely to me, based on all of this stuff that we've just been going through, is that whatever, if you take the idea of evolution, that maybe that process did take place to result in all of these different types, but I don't think that was just in the Pliocene. Like, in other words, it seems to me more likely that all of these different hominid types were just brother or sister
Yeah.
types that
Yeah.
coexisted all the way through, including Homo Sapiens Sapien.
Yeah.
Now, how did they arrive at these different types in the first place? I don't know.
Right.
But it doesn't, it seems like that there was an agenda to discover this particular lineage, which they did. And now you can see in these modern stories that I've like collected 5 or 6 of right here, they're finally saying to themselves, like, okay, we can't continue with that idea.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you're right. There definitely was an agenda.
Yeah.
And it may have been a little too rushed.
Yeah.
They weren't careful enough and honest enough with themselves.
Right.
About what they were really finding. And
too willing to accept sketchy data that supported the idea and too willing to get rid of decent data that didn't support it.
Right. To call it sketchy even though it was decent. Yeah.
Yep.
All right. Got a few more Sam Squancheries here, and then we'll close this out.
Oh, crap. Didn't start this.
Oh, well. We got the timer up there. In 1957, a biology teacher in Zhejiang province obtained the hands and feet of a man bear, quote-unquote man bear, killed by local peasants. Zhu Guoxing later examined them. Although he did not think they were from a wild man, he concluded that they came from an unknown primate. So the local peasants called it a man bear. So there you go. There's like this weird mixing with a bear. Why do they keep thinking it's a bear? Especially
probably
here,
because it's broad and it's got the same type of fur.
But in these cases, especially like in South America and in China, they know what primates are. They have them, monkeys and
yeah.
So for them to compare it more to a bear and a man rather than like a kind of a big monkey guy is interesting to me, I think. So, I don't know. In 1976, 6 cadres from the Shenanjia forestry region in Hubei province were driving at night down the highway near the village of Chunshuya between Fangjian country and Shenanjia. On the way, they encountered a strange, tailless creature with reddish fur. Fortunately, it stood still long enough for 5 of the people to get out of the car and look at it from a distance of only a few feet while the driver kept his headlights trained on it. The observers were certain that it was not a bear or any other creature with which they were familiar. They reported the incident in a telegram to the Chinese Academy of Sciences in Beijing. Over the years, Academy officials had received many similar reports from the same region of Hubei province. So when they heard about this incident, they decided to thoroughly investigate the matter. A scientific expedition consisting of more than 100 members proceeded to Hubei province. They collected physical evidence in the form of hair, footprints, and feces, and recorded sightings by the local inhabitants. Subsequent research has added to these results. Altogether, more than 1,000 footprints have been found in Hubei province, some of them more than 19 inches long. Over 100 wildman hairs have been collected, the longest measuring 21 inches. Some have sought to explain these sightings as encounters with the rare golden monkey, which inhabits the same area. The golden monkey might very well account for reports of creatures glimpsed for a moment at a great distance, but considering the case of Peng Zhenxing, a local commune leader who was confronted in the forest by a wild man, he stood face to face with the creature at a distance of 5 feet for an hour, and he said he was about 7 feet tall, shoulders wider than a man's, a sloping forehead, deep-set eyes, and a bulbous nose with slightly upturned nostrils. He had sunken cheeks, ears like a man's but bigger, round eyes also bigger than a man's. His jaw jutted out, and he had protruding lips. His front teeth were as broad as a horse's. His eyes were black. His hair was dark brown, more than a foot long, and hung loosely over his shoulders. His whole face, except for the nose and ears, were covered with short hairs. His arms hung down to below his knees. He had big hands with fingers about 6 inches long and thumbs only slightly separated from the fingers. He didn't have a tail, and the hair on his body was short. He had thick thighs, shorter than the lower part of his legs. He walked upright with his legs apart. His feet were each about 12 inches long and half that across, broader in front and narrow behind with splayed toes.
Wow.
Yeah.
Dang.
It does sound like a relict hominid, right? Yeah. And yeah, Kyle was waving a picture from one of his articles. It looks just like what this dude was describing, pretty much.
Yeah, this is the new hominid species unearthed in Chinese caves.
Yeah.
This is the one that is estimated to be like 11,500 to 14,300 years old.
See, it's even easier to believe that some of those might still be around, hiding in the hinterlands, right? All right, wildmen of Malaysia and Indonesia. In 1969, John McKinnon, who journeyed to Borneo to observe orangutans, came across some human-like footprints. McKinnon asked his Malay boatman what made them. Without a moment's hesitation, he replied, "Batutut," wrote McKinnon. Later, in Malaya, McKinnon saw some casts of footprints even bigger than those he had seen in Borneo, but he recognized them as definitely having been made by the same kind of creature. The Malayans called it orang pendek, meaning short fellow. According to Ivan Sanderson, these footprints differ from those of the anthropoid apes inhabiting the Indonesian forests, which are the gibbon, the siamang, and orangutan.
You remember the gibbon was like what they were theorizing, the jawbone.
All right, a giant gibbon.
Yeah.
Yeah. They are also distinct from those of the sun bear. Early in the 20th century, L.C. Westenek, governor of Sumatra, received a written report about an encounter with a type of wildman called Sedapa. The overseer of an estate in the Barisan Mountains, along with some workers, observed the Sedapa from a distance of 15 yards. The overseer said he saw a large creature, low on its feet, which ran like a man and was about to cross my path. It was very hairy, and it was not an orangutan. In a journal article about wildmen published in 1918, Westenek recorded a report from Mr. Ustin, I think is how you say this, Ustin, who lived in Sumatra. Once, while proceeding through the forest, he came upon a man sitting on a log facing away from him. Ustin stated, "I suddenly realized that his neck was oddly leathery and extremely filthy. That chap's got a very dirty and wrinkled neck," I said to myself, and then I saw that it was not a man. It was not an orangutan, declared Ustin. I had seen one of these large apes a short time before. So what was the creature, if not an orangutan? Ustin could not say for sure. As we have seen, some have suggested that wildmen may represent surviving representatives of the Neanderthals or Homo erectus. If there is uncertainty about what kinds of hominids may be around today, how can we be so sure about what kinds of hominids may or may not have been around in the distant past? Empiric investigation of the fossil record may not be a sure guide. As Bernard Heuvelmans stated in a letter in April 15, 1986 to our researcher Stephen Bernath, do not overestimate the importance of the fossil record. Fossilization is a very rare, exceptional phenomenon, and the fossil record cannot thus give us an exact image of life on Earth during the past geological periods. The fossil record of primates is particularly poor because very intelligent and cautious animals can avoid more easily the very conditions of fossilization, such as sinking in mud or peat, for instance. The empiric method undoubtedly has its limitations, and the fossil record is incomplete and imperfect. But when all the evidence, including that for very ancient humans and living ape men, is objectively evaluated, the pattern that emerges is one of continuing coexistence rather than sequential evolution. Africa. Native informants from several countries in the western part of the African continent, such as the Ivory Coast, have given accounts of a race of pygmy-like creatures covered with reddish hair, and Europeans have also encountered these. From the Congo region come reports of the Kakandakari, or Kilomba, about 5.5 feet tall, covered with hair. They are said to walk upright like humans. Charles Cordier, a professional animal collector who worked for many zoos and museums, followed tracks of the Kakundakari in Zaire in the late 1950s and early 1960s. Once, he said, a Kakundakari had become entangled in one of his bird snares. "It fell on its face," said Cordier, "turned over, sat up, took the noose off its feet, and walked away before the nearby African could do anything. Which is like, that's an intelligent action, right? An animal can't do that.
I wonder what curse words he used. Did you know?
Yeah, start swearing. Reports of such creatures also come from southern Africa. Pascal Tassi of the Laboratory of Vertebrate and Human Paleontology wrote in 1983, Philip V. Tobias, now on the board of directors of the International Society of Cryptozoology, once told Heuvelmans that one of his colleagues had set traps to capture living Australopithecines. Tobias, from South Africa, is a recognized authority on Australopithecus. According to standard views, the last Australopithecines perished approximately 750,000 years ago, and Homo erectus died out around 200,000 years ago. The Neanderthals, it is said, vanished about 35,000 years ago, and since then, fully modern humans alone have existed throughout the entire world, and yet many sightings of different kinds of wild men in various parts of the world strongly challenge this standard view. I don't know. I think that's just really cool.
That's cool.
To bring in Sam Squanch, you know, to push this point home is just, I find that's perfect. So, mainstream science and wildman reports. Despite all the evidence we have presented, most recognized authorities in anthropology and zoology decline to discuss the existence of wildmen. If they mention wildmen at all, they rarely present the really strong evidence for their existence, focusing instead on the reports least likely to challenge their disbelief. Skeptical scientists say that no one has found any bones of wildmen, nor, they say, has anyone produced a single body, dead or alive. But hand and foot specimens of reputed wildmen and even a head have been collected. Competent persons report having examined bodies of wildmen, and there are also a number of accounts of capture. That none of this physical evidence has made its way into museums and other scientific institutions may be taken as a failure of the process for gathering and preserving evidence. The operation of what we call a knowledge filter tends to keep evidence tinged with disrepute outside of official channels. However, some scientists with solid reputations, such as Krantz, Napier, Shackley, Porshnev, and others, have found in the available evidence enough reason to conclude that wild men do in fact exist, or at least that the question of their existence is worthy of serious study. Myra Shackley wrote to our researcher Stephen Bernath on December 4th in 1984. As you know, this whole question is highly topical, and there has been an awful lot of correspondence and publication flying around on the scene. Opinions vary, but I guess that the commonest would be that there is indeed sufficient evidence to suggest at least the possibility of the existence of various unclassified man-like creatures, but that in the present state of our knowledge, it is impossible to comment on their significance in any more detail. The position is further complicated by misquotes, hoaxing, and lunatic fringe activities, but a surprising number of hardcore anthropologists seem to be of the opinion that the matter is very worthwhile investigating. So there is some scientific recognition of the wildman evidence, but it seems to be largely a matter of privately expressed views with little or no official recognition. All right, that's just about it. I've got one more ending paragraph here, if I can get to it. Because he dives back into Australopithecus finds in Africa. And I was just like, well, I think we've done enough of that, because it's the same story as what we went through with China and Java. And it's just happening in Africa. And then there's a bunch of stuff in, let's see. Yeah, this is all African finds. Okay. Well, let's just skip to the end.
I was just thinking about, like,
here it is.
This is really dumb, but it's like all the Sasquatches that leave their footprints behind and get seen by people, because they're obviously really good at not being seen. And covering their tracks. And those are Samsons.
What?
Instead of Johnson?
Oh, yeah.
There's a Sam Squanch? Samson?
You got seen?
Nice going, Samps.
Yeah, you got seen by a human. Nice going, Samps. That's perfect. There you go.
So if I ever see one in the woods, I'm gonna be like, "What's going on, Samson?"
Samson is the Johnson of Sasquatch.
That's right.
All right, I got it.
I was trying to find a better way to set it up, but
No, that was good.
you were digging through your book, so I figured I'd
Yeah.
just throw it out there.
All right. This is pretty much the final couple of paragraphs in the book. So he says, having reviewed the history of African discoveries related to human evolution, we can make the following summary observations. 1. There is a significant amount of evidence from Africa suggesting that beings resembling anatomically modern humans were present in the early Pleistocene and Pliocene. 2. The conventional image of Australopithecus as a very human-like terrestrial biped appears to be false. Okay, so I'll support this with, because we didn't read any of this, but he shows how when they first started finding Australopithecus bits, which is how they find tiny little fragments, and then they would build this complete person out of a few tiny bone fragments. And they give them basically what you end up with is somebody with a very primitive looking head, but otherwise a pretty much modern human body.
Yeah.
That's what the original picture. But when they end up finding a complete Australopithecus skeleton,
It's huge.
it's like 3 feet tall and basically looks like a monkey, right? So they were basically like putting up, when they only had skull fragments, they gave it like this primitive skull, but a modern Homo Sapiens body, 5 feet tall or whatever, 5.5 feet tall. And then when they find a complete skeleton, it's like 3.5 feet, maybe 4 feet tall, and basically looks like a monkey. Arms hang all the way to the ground. It isn't a human at all. Okay. And yet they still persist. The idea that Australopithecus is probably a human ancestor that's fairly recent still persists for some reason, even though, and the same thing happened with Homo habilis. So I don't know. It's weird. So that's what they're saying there. He says there is the conventional image of Australopithecus as a very human-like terrestrial biped appears to be false. The status of Australopithecus and Homo erectus as human ancestors is questionable. And 4, the status of Homo habilis as a distinct species is also questionable, right? So these are all things these are conclusions from this whole section on Africa finds that we basically skipped. So I'm just reading through the conclusions. And 5, even confining ourselves to conventionally accepted evidence, the multiplicity of proposed evolutionary linkages among the hominids in Africa presents a very confusing picture. Combining these findings with those from the preceding chapters, we conclude that the total evidence, including fossil bones and artifacts, is most consistent with the view that anatomically modern humans have coexisted with other primates for tens of millions of years.
All right.
Book over.
Book over. Great job. Great job, Johns. And the watcher says it should be John Squanch.
John Squanch. Okay.
Fine. I like Samson. No, that's
So yeah, maybe I should have read a few excerpts from the Africa finds, but it just like after the Sasquatch, I felt like the Sasquatch was a great sort of closer. And I'm like, wow, this is really cool, the Sasquatch stuff. And then there's like another 50 pages of detailed.
Just get the book, right?
Yeah, exactly. So get the book if you want to read the Africa finds. Going through Lakey's stuff, all the problems with Australopithecus and Homo habilis, and the images that what they depicted them looking like before they found complete skeletons using, so you find a skull fragment, right? And then they would come up with this human form using that skull fragment. And then later somebody would find a almost complete skeleton where the skull of this skeleton was clearly the same thing that made that fragment and doesn't look anything like what they depicted it as.
Right.
And there's just kind of like ignoring that and keeping it where it is because they need this. I don't know. It's weird.
What was the one that they were thinking was going to be gigantic? It's like a
Meganthropus.
Meganthropus, that's right. I looked that up, and the only thing I could find about it was just somebody suggesting that was what they would call something that was giant.
Oh.
A giant human ancestor. So I couldn't find any actual finds that.
Yeah, because it was never accepted. That was clear going through that story too. That.
But I thought that happened in one of the stories.
It does, yeah. And he calls it Meganthropus, but it's never accepted as any kind of. And they never did.
Oh, this is when they were finding the other one, Gigantopithecus.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. They think
ended up deciding that it was
Gigantopithecus. Yeah, a primate. Yeah.
Okay, that's what it was. But yeah, I thought that surely in all of these digs there would be something. I mean, I guess it was the one, there were like these gigantic teeth or something.
Yeah.
I can't remember what the details were, but it just seems, it doesn't seem far-fetched that there would be giant human ancestors.
Right. Yeah.
Especially in the Pleistocene, when there were so many other gigantic forms of similar animals of today.
Yeah, I agree with that too.
And they have found the, Floriensis or whatever, the small ones.
Homo floriensis. I've looked at people's attempts, artistic depictions of what they may have looked like too, and they're
Night Watcher.
They're a little bit freaky looking. Because their eyes are so big. They've got these little bitty heads, but they've got these gigantic eyes. It's kind of, they look cool, but still, I don't know. For some reason, the pictures, I'm just like, whoa, it's a little bit freaky looking. And I thought the same thing of that, the dragon guy.
Yeah.
He's got these gigantic eye sockets.
Yeah.
Huge square, eye sockets. I don't know.
Yeah, one of the stories I was looking at recently had I guess it was a better picture of the dragon man skull that was up close.
Yeah.
And those brow ridges are just,
yeah.
They look fake.
Yeah.
I was looking at them like, God, this it doesn't look real to me. But I was also once again struck by I found a human skull, right?
That's right.
Like in an occupation area, there were arrowheads, lots of arrowheads, and that was what was sticking out of the dirt was the lines, above the eye sockets. These prominent bulging lines above the eye sockets, and it looked like eyes looking straight up out of the dirt, right? And it was that piece of the skull that was the eyebrow ridges, and then all the way around the eye socket,
the orbitals,
orbitals, and then the piece of the nose.
Yeah,
it was one piece, and then I started digging and scratching away at the dirt, and I started finding pieces of the skull and everything, and then teeth and all that stuff. It was freaking crazy, dude. But I was putting it together, and I actually got there was enough large pieces of the skull where I could actually put them together where they fit.
Yeah.
And I had it sort of propped up on the ground, just put it together to see what the shape of the head and the face was, and it was freaking badass. But it didn't have a prominent forehead.
Yeah. Basically starts going back
behind the brow ridges.
Yeah. Man.
And I was like, to me, I didn't know anything about any of this stuff at the time, but I was like, okay, yeah, this is definitely a primitive person.
Yeah.
And I thought that it was before I knew anything about long heads.
Yeah.
I could the skull size, the actual cranium, seemed like it was big, long.
Yeah, it had
not a foot long or anything, but just it had an elongated. It looked elongated, yeah. But when you look at some of these ones in these pictures,
yeah, when the brain case goes directly
when
back,
it goes back instead of up,
yeah.
that's kind of what it looked like.
Yeah, it gives that.
They weren't that prominent, but it definitely didn't look like my idea of a modern human skull.
Yeah.
But apparently finds there had been many finds of burials in that area.
Yeah.
And some of them, like the university had taken them and dated them, and they were like 900 something years. Is what I was told.
Yeah, that's right.
So I don't know. That was really one
Yeah,
of the coolest things that ever happened to me.
Old Caliopithecus.
Yeah. I was thinking it was a Native American. I just reburied it. And there were like the reason I found it in the first place was because I looked down, I see a broken spear point. Like I don't know if it was a spear point. It was a big knife blade, basically.
Okay. Yeah.
That was broken off. And I'm bending down to pick it up, and then there's the eyes like looking up out of the dirt. I'm like, ah!
Yeah, that is.
So I ended up burying it with that artifact, the piece of, just kind of like, all right, that was really cool. Spent the whole afternoon until almost dark, like excavating it and finding the bones and putting the skull together, and just like, had a flip phone. Took a picture of it with my crappy flip phone back in the day, and don't know where that phone went.
Oh, no.
Yeah. But
didn't happen.
Didn't happen, folks.
Pics or it didn't
no
happen.
pics. That's right.
All right, guys. Well, I hope you enjoyed that. Next week, I think we'll have... Well, we'll see. We'll see what happens next week. I don't want to
tell them plans.
Yeah, I don't want to tell any plans because they may not work out. So we'll definitely be changing subjects next week, no matter what.
It's all the same subject.
Yeah. We're done with the book. Let's just put it that way. So you guys get a hold of us, brothersoftheserpent@gmail.com. Still going through the email backlog, but I see you guys are still sending them. That's good. Keep doing it. Website is brothersoftheserpent.com. That's where you can find all the podcast-related stuff and other things, peripheral things, including the encyclopedia, the glossary, the snakeskin, which is our merchandise. Get yourself T-shirts or a hat, or even, like they've got like sketchbooks and bags and all kinds of stuff, stickers. And but yeah, there is hats there too, and also the cool designs that Jeff has been making, like the Johnson shirt. Gotta get a Johnson shirt.
Yeah, we need to get timestamps. Gotta make those timestamps so people can, workout guy can get his timestamps for when the actual real subject matter starts. Collect all 204.
Collect all 204 timestamps.
Yeah, you buy them and they come in a little sheet of paper and you can peel the stamp off.
Oh, okay, I see. Yeah, there you go.
And it has the time for that episode, what time the actual subject matter started.
But it's an actual
It's
stamp.
a stamp.
Yeah, a stamp.
Yeah, we
Okay.
got to make stamps.
Okay.
Guys,
Got it.
I saw the discussion in the Discord. That's what I'm saying. We got to sell these, right? We're not going to put them in the info for the show, but we sell actual timestamps.
Yeah, a booklet of timestamps.
Genius.
Yeah, a booklet of timestamps. There you go.
Workout guy can buy the whole set.
And grandma.
That's right.
Workout guy and grandma can get the whole set of timestamps. That's genius. All right. Let's see. But so join the Discord if you want to talk about timestamps and all kinds of other stuff. You want to come up with cool ideas. They got a book club in there. They got the remote viewing channel. Check that out if you guys are interested in trying out your remote viewing skills. One of our admins, Wish, has set up a whole remote viewing system, and so you can get in touch with her through that channel, and she'll give you all the details, and you can try it out. See how good you are. And thanks, of course, to History Shift, who makes all of our podcasts into YouTube videos. Lots of work, so thanks to him. Pod Doodles also has been doing great work. Jeez. Did I mention this already? The avocado and
Oh, yeah.
the avocado
Yeah, you
UFO and triangle chips thing he made.
That was awesome.
Awesome.
Freaking genius,
Yeah,
bruh.
he's genius. And I think that's it. Thanks to Soraya from Where Did the Road Go, Ben from Uncharted X.
Michigan UFO sightings and Paranormal Encounters podcast.
That's right. We did go on Michigan UFO sightings, and that episode is out, episode 9. So give that a listen if you guys want to hear us talk podcasting and ancient civilizations and UFOs for a couple hours with those guys. That was great. That was a good show. And thanks to all you listeners out there. We love you guys.
Always have.
Always will.
Good night, Adamu.
Get back to work.